So thanks for joining myself and Augusta Oi on the UK Lumia. So I'm here right now in the beautiful Eastcheap, in the heart of the city of London, the beautiful capital, the financial capital, and I'm here with one of the leading experts in property finance from Foster Denver.
Denova.
So we're going to be looking at 5 key things. We're going to be looking at interest relief first of all, and you were discussing with me before we went live about the main changes.
Yeah.
So
what main changes? Okay, well, obviously interest relief has been introduced by the government last year and really kind of kicks in April 2017. Now the main people that are going to be impacted are people who currently have a job and are in a high rate taxpayer, and maybe a high rate taxpayer, and perhaps have purchased somewhere between 2 to 10 properties, and they've done this for a bit of extra income or for their pension provisions. And I think these are people who are going to be hardest hit the most, and they're going to see their tax bills go up quite a lot. And so it really is thinking about what they can do. We should be really kind of liaising with their accountants now, because essentially it's going to be a tax on turnover, no longer on profit, and that's going to make a massive impact as to whether continuing to invest in that way makes sense. Yeah.
Sure. So borrowing money is looking more difficult. Is there a way around it though?
Yeah, I mean borrowing money is harder now. Really, essentially, it's impacting people who are holding property, as I say, in their individual names, as opposed to kind of limited companies. So if you wanted to look at limited company borrowing, that could be a way around it. Now, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about purchasing through limited companies. And I mean, some of the key things to bear in mind is, at the moment, interest rates tend to be slightly higher if they're held in limited companies. Your arrangement fee might reflect that as well. Having said that, if you're purchasing through limited companies, what you avoid is the impact of this interest relief. So the tax on profit stays as opposed to this tax on turnover. You can expense all your interest away before you have to pay tax, and you're only paying corporation tax. And I think limited company investing is really good for things like generational planning. So if you're going to give property to your children, as opposed to having to sell it to them or find ways around that, you can actually just put them on as directors when they come of age, when they're in the right situation, and you can kind of pass down your portfolios that way. So it's quite a clever way of long-term planning, in my view.
Sure.
Yeah.
So limited companies, I can see the advantages.
Yeah.
What should the listeners out there, and thank you for joining me this morning, or whether you're listening after as well. Augusta, one thing I just want to make sure we do for you or your benefit is, I'm not brilliant at pronouncing your name, so how can people connect with you after this?
Okay. I think the best thing would be to try and find me on LinkedIn. I'm really active on LinkedIn. The name is Augusta on UK Eluma.
Can you spell that?
Yeah, so it's ONYUKE-ELUMA. If you were to Google that, and perhaps maybe Foster Denova, you should be able to find me online. But yeah, if you were to send me a LinkedIn message, I probably could. Yeah, I will get back in touch with you. Yeah.
Sure. And for my benefit, maybe just say that you heard Augusta from me. That'd be great. So we've looked at limited companies briefly.
Yeah.
So what are the things for people to be aware of, though, if they're thinking of going down the limited route?
Okay, as I said before, your rate's going to tend to be a little bit higher. Now, there's a conception out there that if you're buying for a limited company, rates are going to be 2 to 3% higher. That's simply not true. If we look at where, there's a lot of lenders offering rates at the moment, which is around the 75% loan to value arena. Now, you can get, on a buy-to-let basis, a bit higher than 75, 80, 85, but, the market there is small and rates are a bit higher. But if we say 75% loan to value, where rates are competitive, you are probably going to be in on a standard mortgage for somewhere between 2.7, 3.2%, yeah? If we compare that to limited company, around 75% loan to value, you're looking at rates of say 3.5% to 4.5%. It's actually not that much difference, provided that obviously your rent stack up and the deal still works. I mean, it should be stress testing at 5.5%, 6% anyway. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's worth considering.
So let's just say that again. Yeah. So 5.5% to 6%. That's where you're looking at the stress test.
I think stress test is something that we really should talk about in this presentation, because it kind of completes the full picture. But when you are assessing a deal as an investor, you should be stress testing the deal at 5.5%, 6% anyway. If not a bit higher. And that's what lenders do. When a lender decides how much they're going to lend on a buy-to-let basis, they look at the rental income, they apply a stress test, and they lend on that basis. So traditionally, that stress test was 125% at 5%, which is 125% rent cover with a stress test of 5%. That's changing now because of this interest relief, and we're seeing lending your individual name, the stress tests being more stringent. So instead of 125 at 5, we're looking at 145 at say 5.5, which means the amount of money that you can borrow effectively reduces. And so the result of that is it becomes harder to buy property in your individual name. You need more money to do it, and then you're going to be taxed even harder on the other side.
When we say property, what are we looking at? Are we looking at everything from single lets to HMOs to?
Well, so we're looking at predominantly single lets, multi lets, your HMOs, residential property essentially. If you want to use the residential portion to borrow, that's what we're talking about. Now, commercial is a slightly different story because they use slightly different valuations in terms of how they decide how they're going to lend to you. But really, it's anything from a commercial residential basis. So you're buying it for someone else to live in and pay you a rent.
Well, one thing which we haven't looked at, and it's only a relatively short video, and if you like it, maybe we can do another video at some point, is one of the growing trends right now, service accommodation, but I'm sure that can be for a different video at a different time. From what I notice, and I say trends, and it's not me doing any presentations, I'm just listening to the experts, to be fair, like Luke Hamill, he's presenting at my Central London evening meet next week, focusing on trends. It'd be interesting to see whether he brings in service accommodation. Also, the other trend is build-to-let as well, and we haven't really looked at the development side, and I'm sure that's for another video as well. This is more on the HMOs, single lets, as you say. So we've looked at limited companies. About creating equity as well. What's your views on that for our listeners here?
Yeah, so I mean, this links really closely to what we've been talking about before. If you continue to buy your individual name, potentially, with the higher stress tests, where they still manage to work is up north. So up north, about Birmingham and above, they still work really well. To be fair, I mean, probably from about Milton Keynes and above, they still work quite well. If you continue to buy an individual name, in terms of being able to achieve like perhaps 75% loan to value as opposed to being stuck at 60. Where you're really going to have the massive impact is down south. So London and greater southern area, these stress tests are going to mean that people are going to struggle to get past 50% loan to value, particularly on a single let basis. Maybe a bit more in a HMO, but the value of property in the south relative to the rent, the yields are a bit lower. We've seen that for years. So in terms of creating equity, I think that if you continue to invest down south, I think that the ways that you're going to look to create equity, the way that the valuers are going to come back and say, you know what, we do think that value's been added here. It's not just enough changing a bathroom or a kitchen anymore. I think you've got to consider things like digging basements, loft extensions, maybe freehold to leasehold conversions.
Okay, so in terms of splitting and so
exactly,
forth.
You really have to be.
You're seeing a growth in terms of splitting.
I'm seeing a growth in people having to achieve, create serious equity in order to kind of get the new values out, to maximise their rent and to push up the valuations. Because I mean now you go down to South London, you'll find a 3-bed house that's fallen down. Even if you're trying to get below market value, it's nearly impossible because everyone's going to crowd there, knowing that, especially if they're buying it to live in it, they're going to go, move into it, knowing that in 10 years' time they can do it out while they're living there and get it. So it's really hard to achieve. It's really hard to kind of achieve below market value, particularly in London area and surrounding areas. So really, you've kind of forced to buy at market price, and if you're going to do that, the only way to really create equity, if your plan is to refinance and pull some money out in the short term, is to physically create equity. And that kind of thing, normally requires some kind of planning or some kind of permitted development. but that's really how people are going to be making money, in my view, in the South over the next few years.
Sure. And most of my listeners, whether you're live right now or whether you're listening after, I do share this on YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn and so forth. Looking at the picture of property investing as a whole, the future, and you can't look too far in the future, but where do you see it going?
Well, certain trends that I see at the moment, I think, one of the key things, because of these changes, I think it's going to be harder to get into deals, because of the stress test and all that's going to be harder to get into deals. So I think there's going to be a lot more JVing, a lot more joint venture relationships coming together. And I think that a lot of this is going to happen through limited companies, where it's easier to see, who's bringing what, who owns what. Even if they're going to use loan agreements, it's always neater when it's kind of done through a limited company structure. So that's definitely one of the key things that I see. I think there's going to be definitely more government changes to the future. I don't think we've seen the end of it. I think they've hit the nail on the head. Money's in property. How are we going to squeeze them? They've done a lot already. There's probably going to be a few revisions to some of the things they've already done, potentially to the stamp duty change. I mean, I don't really see it coming, but they reckon by the 23rd of November there'll be another budget. Philip Hammond is a bit more buy-to-let focused, so there might be a change.
23rd of November is my next Central London. Oh, sorry, I'm off the pitch there. But 23rd of November is my Central London evening property network. So that's interesting. You mentioned that day. So we've looked at different aspects. One thing I definitely want to discuss with Augusta at some point is about service accommodation, because that's a huge trend as well. Also want to look at the build-to-let market as well. From my experience hosting, organising events, you can just get an inkling of what's popular out there by a long way, what people are interested in. But it's interesting you mentioned things such as JVing, nothing new in that, but maybe the popularity or the growth in that. You come across about creating equity, looking at splitting as well. What's the last remark you want to make so for our listeners out there? They know how to connect with you. It's Augusta.
On UK.
On UK. Lumia.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn. But what's your last remark?
My last remark really is that the world of investing is changing. I really hope that people who are paying to go to property courses that are getting this new education, because I think for me that's the worry. I mentioned a lot about these changes to investing. So if someone's got quite a lot of property in an individual name, I think that before January 2017, you really need to speak to an advisor about potentially pulling money out, because come January 2017, the Prudential Regulation Authority, they've said that this stress test needs to kind of be blanket across all the lenders who are governed by the PRA, and the consequence will mean that you'll be a mortgage prisoner. Now, I'm not saying that if you don't utilise the stress tests now that you won't be a mortgage prisoner in the future. Yeah, you probably will be, but at least you'll have a bunch of money, you'll have a pot of money that you can carry on growing with. Because I think, there's some people who are just not really paying attention to what's going on, and they're going to wake up maybe next year, in a couple of years, and they're going to find that they're pretty stuck and end up having to sell some of their properties just to do something else.
I know, I've spoken to people who are doing that.
Well, this is it. And I think, right now, if you're really smart about what's going on, you can pull some money aside, hold on to it. Yeah, it's a bit of a pain that you'll be servicing a bit of interest, but there's so many opportunities, because I think there'll be more properties coming to the market because of these changes, and I think it will give you the opportunity to carry on investing. So I just think it's all about being ready. It's all about keeping your ears to the ground, paying attention to the experts.
Where do you keep it? Of course, you've got your own industry magazines, I'm sure.
So where do I keep up to date with the information? I mean, to be honest, I do this on a daily basis, so it's not like a hobby to me. I've got to know what's going on all the time to be able to advise my clients correctly, but I rely heavily on Google alerts.
Oh, really?
I want to know there's key terms. I want to know when the changes are coming into the market. So I'll pay attention to that. Yeah, there's a few industry magazines that are out there. Don't have a massive amount of time to read magazines.
Sure.
Probably a bit more like you, Brendan. I like talking to people, so I spend a lot of time talking to people who are actually out there. But actually, one of my biggest sources of information are my lenders. and they'll come to me and they'll sit with me and they'll say, look, these are the changes that are coming, these are the things that you need to tell your clients about. And I am grateful for those relationships. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I have got one more Facebook Live this afternoon. So I've never done a triple day, but today is a triple day. So it's with Carl Hutchings. So Carl's an investor, developer based in South London. So I'm crossing the river. I actually crossed the river to get a Shard, but crossing the river a bit more. And be staying on that side of the river for some time today, partially because my event in the evening, the Wandsworth Property Network, which is focused on auctions. I just want to say huge thanks to you listening. I want to say huge thanks to you, Augusta, as well. Yeah. Thank you.